Welcome to Longwood Gardens. My name is Kate Santos, and I'm the Associate Vice President of the Science Division here at Longwood, and it is my sincere pleasure to welcome you here today. Science at Longwood Gardens is very diversified, and I think that's one of the things that makes it very exciting to be a part of it here at Longwood, and why we love the opportunity to share all of the different things that we're doing, sometimes behind the scenes, sometimes in front of the scenes. So our scientific endeavors are defined by a diligent, research-based approach that artfully innovates how we can celebrate and coexist with the natural world in order to ensure and depict its beauty in perpetuity for generations to come. We are comprised of 4 distinct teams: our Land Stewardship and Ecology team, of which Lea Johnson leads and will be talking with you today. And Land Stewardship and Ecology innovate experimental land stewardship practices that conserve and cultivate native biodiversity while inspiring with the beauty of native plants and historic landscapes. Our Conservation, Horticulture, and Collections team plays an integral role in the global preservation and celebration of plants by conducting research projects that bridge knowledge gaps and contribute to solutions to conserve and curate a collection that celebrates plant species, diversity throughout our natural lands and displays. Floriculture production combines art and science to bring horticulture to life through innovation and ingenuity, and to grow plants in novel, artistic, surprising, and innovative ways. And last but not least is our soils and composting team, and that is really focused on the sustainability and circularity of producing high-quality materials that are derived from materials collected right here on the gardens and then recirculated back into the gardens to essentially use the beauty from the year before to create the beauty for the year to come. But today, you are in for a treat. Lea Johnson is certainly an accomplished scientist, and while the idea of managing hundreds of acres of diverse landscapes is unimaginable for most, it's a daily reality for Leah and for our team here at Science. Approximately 65% of our 1,100-acre property is comprised of meadows, forests, wetlands, and agricultural lands that surround our formal gardens. Dr. Lea Johnson is the Associate Director of our Land Stewardship and Ecology team, which is a part of our Science Division, and she directs a multidisciplinary, incredibly talented team to advance evidence-based adaptive management of the 750 acres of diverse habitats we have here. Dr. Johnson is an ecologist and land manager who joins research in ecological science with applications to land stewardship and design. Her research seeks to understand the ecology of changing environments and to advance the science underpinning successful interventions to improve ecosystem health and functions in an urbanizing world. She is interested in processes that unfold over time at multiple spatial and temporal scales. She's also a seasoned educator who enjoys working with curious people from kindergartners to lifelong learners. She has earned a doctorate in ecology and evolution from Rutgers University and master's degrees in natural resource management and science education. She is an affiliate faculty member in the Plant Science Graduate Program at the University of Maryland Department of Plant Science and Landscape Architecture. Today, Leah will share how we utilize prescribed fires, wildlife monitoring, invasive species management, and much more in our natural lands approach. She will explore our steadfast commitment to protecting natural resources, restoring the land, and making sound decisions for the future. Our team works tirelessly to preserve and conserve and restore biodiversity both here and far beyond our gardens, and we're very excited to share some of our work with you here today. Without further ado, Dr. Johnson.
Hello. If you've been to Longwood, you have seen the beautiful conservatory, you've seen the wonderful outdoor displays, the fountains, the performing arts. What a lot of people don't realize is that all of that magic is surrounded by natural areas. And the core of Longwood is our conservatories and beautiful outdoor landscapes. And all around that are natural communities, and they are really quite diverse and fascinating. So if you have wandered beyond the very center of Longwood, you've probably seen the Meadow garden. The Meadow Garden is 86 acres of about 240. We have meadows all over our natural areas. We have, as Kate mentioned, we have wetlands and streams. We actually have almost 5 miles of streams. Longwood is on a ridgeline, and there are lots of little teeny-weeny streams that flow downhill from here. We have forests of various ages, and we have reforestation areas. We have almost 300 acres of forest, and that forest has beautiful spring ephemeral wildflowers and many, many forms of wildlife that live in it, as do our meadows and our streams. And all of this is happening in a slightly leafier corner of the megalopolis, just to put it all in bigger picture context. So today I'm going to talk about the Land Stewardship and Ecology program, which I began in 2019. And we integrate ecological science and adaptive land management for both biodiversity and beauty. So we are integrating all of that, all of the natural habitats with the experience of Longwood. So we have 3 main areas in which we work: ecological science, adaptive land management, and inspiring natural beauty. We conserve and restore biodiversity, protecting and maintaining high-quality habitats, conserving rare species, decreasing invasive species, and we're planting for biodiversity. This past year, in 2023, we planted 4,664 plants. We counted them all in a variety of different places. And one of the main things that we've been focusing on this year and for the next few years is our riparian plantings, our streamside forests, to shade our streams, to keep the water cool, to buffer against other land uses, and keep the soil where it should be. We also manage wildlife to support healthy wildlife populations, doing habitat conservation and restoration, monitoring. We do manage nuisances. Watch out for the squirrels. Don't feed them. They bite. And we also manage our herbivore populations, particularly the deer, for healthy herds, and to keep our forests able to regenerate, so they don't eat everything. We love to help inspire people with the beauty of native plants and landscapes in our 100-acre meadow and forest district, which you may have wandered around. We have the beauty of the whole landscape, and then we also have focal areas where we focus on particularly gorgeous native plants that people might want to use in their home gardens, which we label and interpret, working with our amazing docent and volunteer teams. We also bring a little bit of the natural world into our Christmas displays and bring Christmas into the natural world in the Meadow Garden. And we share our knowledge in a whole bunch of different ways, like this, but also at scientific conferences and through education and writing and all of those different ways. We engage our community in ecological gardening. Some of you here, I think, do this with us. Meadow gardening, pollinator gardening, forest gardening, and working generally with native plants. We help to provide a variety of positive guest experiences by making sure the trails are walkable in the Meadow Garden. We like them to be smooth for you. And we support water quality by managing a variety of different kinds of water retention features to keep our streams healthy, as well as managing our streams themselves. And we work with our facilities department on what I like to call our sustainability infrastructure. We help with the management of our wastewater spray field, our stormwater management, as well as our solar power production field, managing the vegetation of those areas, which are distributed across the natural areas. So the big driving question for my team is, how can we take today's living biodiversity, because that's what we have, the biodiversity we have right at this moment is what we've got, so how can we take that with us into the future? And the answer or at least the working process that we have for that is to integrate land stewardship with science in the process of adaptive land management. And the little stars here are places where in that cycle, science can really help to inform land management. So helping to identify how we're going to know if what we're trying to do is working. Collecting information about what is happening as a result of the management that we do. Analyzing that, thinking about what it means, and then adjusting. And so that is the process of adaptive management. And that helps us to assess progress along a continuum of ecological restoration. And ecological restoration is not so much about going back to the past, it's about restoring health and function and thinking about how can we maximize the biodiversity of what we have? How can we help the maximum amount of today's living biodiversity to travel with us into the future? So our stewardship science program, as Kate mentioned a little bit, we test innovative land stewardship practices. So we like to evaluate the costs and benefits of different practices that are available to people so that we might help inform people who need to make decisions about, well, which method am I going to use to approach this problem? So that we can say, well, you could do this or you could do that. It might take longer if you do it this way, but it might be less expensive. So looking at those kinds of trade-offs. And we work with questions of broad concern to people of the region. And we monitor change. We're interested in long-term ecosystem responses. If you live in a world with trees, they live a long time. And the soil takes a long time to form. There are processes, ecologically speaking, that take a really long time. And so we need to be thinking at multiple timescales, not only a master's student can do like some research for 1 year and then write up the next year, or maybe a Ph.D. student gets 3 years of research. So we like to take a long lens on looking at change, and see those interactions and surprises that can happen over the long term. Use all of that to help make decisions. Some of the projects we have going on right now, we have since 2021 been establishing a long-term ecological research program. We have been mapping and examining, I'll talk more about that in a minute, our plant communities as the first step in that. We have been working on testing different techniques of ecological restoration, techniques for planting so that we can speed things up a little bit and help suppress invasive species in the process so they don't overwhelm the trees, developing forest soils, thinking about plants that might do well in our warmer future, protecting those plants from being eaten by deer, looking at using soil seed banks when soils are disturbed, and of course managing invasive plants, using timing as one of our main tools. So our long-term ecological research program has been kicked off with a study of our plant communities across the 750 acres of natural lands. We're building on a long history of previous plant surveys that have given us a great species list to build from, and we even had researchers from those earlier surveys helping us, Janet Ebert in particular. Monitoring change over time using standard scientific methods so that we can then compare the results that we have here with ecosystems more broadly, and so that we can also look at our communities in relationship to the National Vegetation Classification and the plant communities of Pennsylvania and of our region. To do that, we have built a geographic information system, and this is a draft map, which is continually being revised. We have, to date, identified 225 distinct plant communities with some overlap in type. About a third meadow, about a third forest, about 10% streams and wetlands, reforestation and agricultural areas are all part of the mix. We use mapping also to guide management of plant populations, so we map where we have sensitive plants or plants that you might not be able to see at another time of year, like trout lily. You might not know it's there, in the middle of summer because it's a spring ephemeral. So we map it and we know where it is. If something needs to happen in that area, we know where not to step on it. We also have invasive species. The Longwood's natural areas are I like to think of them as a microcosm of the Mid-Atlantic Piedmont. We have like many of the former land uses, like former agriculture, and here was a golf course, and here was a building, and here used to be a road. So we've had a lot of different land uses over time, and with those have come species that people introduce. Since I'm mentioning invasive species, I can't help but go on a tiny little detour about what an invasive species is so that we're all speaking the same language. It's a little bit different from a weed. A weed is a plant that you don't like where it's growing. And that can be, and I would say that you can definitely call invasive species weeds, but not all weeds are invasive species because some native plants can be annoying, you know, but an invasive species is something that is not native to the place in question, that the introduction of that plant causes or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human, animal, or plant health. So that's a little bit of a higher bar. And it's also helpful, I think, to think about invasion as in the biological sense as a process. It doesn't happen to all the species that are introduced. Most species that are introduced do not become invasive. First, they have to be transported from wherever they're from to a new place on purpose, by accident. Many of them die in transport, especially if being transported by accident. Some arrive alive. Of those that arrive alive, they may fail to reproduce in the new environment, or they might reproduce and start a new population, a small fraction of those. Of those that do reproduce in the new environment, many of those will fail to spread beyond that point of introduction, but some may spread and start populations in new locations. When this happens over and over again, is when you start to see impact, and that's when a species might be considered invasive. Those impacts can include things like changes to ecosystem processes, like increasing fire frequency or changing soil chemistry, changing native plant communities by reducing diversity, and that I think is one of the big problems, is that instead of a diverse array of plants that have a long relationship with the local ecosystem, where there are some insects that know how to eat them and some that need them for their life cycle needs, instead of that diversity, you have one thing. And so you might have some species that are able to take advantage of that, but it's going to be a smaller benefit to the overall ecosystem, which has effects on animal communities as well. So the big question is, what response is appropriate when we're working with invasive species, and when should we act? This is a really helpful diagram. This is from Australia, where they have a lot of introduced species. The most effective way to manage an invasive plant is to stop it getting there in the first place. So preventing. If an invasive species has arrived, you might be able to completely eradicate it from the new place if there are only a few of them. But if it becomes wider spread, you might be able to contain it in the place where it is, and if it's gotten really widespread across whatever landscape you're talking about, then you might just need to keep it out of key areas or remove it from key areas. And I would say in this landscape, we take all of these strategies for different species because we have plants that are very widespread, and then we have things like kudzu, which I don't think is here yet. So we're trying to prevent that one, and if we do see it, we will remove it. So managing invasive plants. I think the key thing here, because it can seem a little overwhelming, has anybody in this audience ever removed an invasive plant? Yes, I see some hands. It can be a little overwhelming, right? So I think the key thing to remember is that we got to the place where we are now by changes that were made in the past, and that we can change the trajectory of the future by changing the conditions. And if we're thinking about plant communities, there are three big things that drive how plant communities change over time, and that's availability of places that are right for plants to grow, what plants are able to get there or are already there, and then the relationships between those, how they perform over time. And removing invasive species removes the individual plants, but also we can change how we are managing the land. So we remove invasive species to increase diversity, make better habitat, and also to make it possible to display our beautiful native plants. It's interesting, you know, when you think about strategy for handling invasive species, there are a lot of different tools you can use, and it's really important to use the right tool in the right way, in the right place, at the right time. There are a lot of things to consider. So the physiology of an individual species, what is the right time to manage it? When in its life cycle is going to be more effective? When is going to use less work? What kind of equipment do you need? And then keeping track and understanding the effect of what you've done so that you can learn from that. Unfortunately, there's not an oodle of information out there about a lot of things, although the state extension services, if you're looking for information, Penn State has a great series of websites on individual species that would be relevant around here. So we manage the plants. We map our management as well. So not only invasive species, but our other kinds of management that we do to make these beautiful, colorful maps of, this is over 3 years. Some of our species are a little more widespread. There's a lot of Canada thistle in that picture, which is not the favorite of our horticultural experts when it blows into the beds around here. So we also do specific long-term studies of methods to control invasive plants so we can investigate new options, understand long-term effects, and share the findings. Right now, we're working on Japanese stiltgrass, is one of the species we're working with. I see some nods there. It's a shade-tolerant grass that makes a carpet of the forest floor and competes with our native wildflowers. So we're looking at different ways of doing that, and we're really interested in the long-term effects of those different techniques on the native plant community, because that is our ultimate goal, is to restore the native plant community. We also participate in public gardens as sentinels against invasive plants, which is a mouthful, but it's a really neat program where people with expertise in botanical gardens and arboreta are watching plants that are introduced to see whether or not they seed, so looking for those early stages so that we can take precautionary measures if we see that plants are exhibiting a tendency to escape. So we've made a lot of maps, and we've taken a lot of data over the last few years. So the next step then is to use that information to make decisions. So we use analysis to prioritize what we're going to do, what stewardship actions we're going to take. So the map that you see here is a map where we analyzed where do we have core forest, that's really forest interior, where do we have edge forest, and where might we be able to connect our forests in the future so that the biodiversity that needs forests can easily get from one forest to the next, and to increase the amount of core forest that we have instead of edge, which tends to be drier and to have more invasive plants in it. So we've been doing forest restoration at Longwood for a while. If you were in the area when Route 52 moved, you might recognize this view of trees when you drive along there now. It looks quite different. We do a variety of different kinds of forest restoration. So we'll work in existing forests to add missing layers back that were eaten by the deer, for example, adding species that are missing, and filling forest canopy gaps where we're not seeing regeneration. We do experimental work with, really, if we're going to do a big planting, I think we should learn something from it. So we like to experiment. So we have been doing experiments with using soils and ideas from ecological succession, change over time. So we had a big pile of wood chips a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, thanks emerald ash borer. But we had a bunch of wood chips and we were wondering what to do with it, and so we thought, well, maybe we can smother the Japanese stiltgrass and build forest soils at the same time in an area that we want to reforest in a huge canopy gap. So we were able to do, this is one of the fun things about working in a botanical garden, is these sort of moments of serendipity where it's like, oh, we've got a lot of this, or what about this over here? So layering on that, we're doing a study where we're looking at spacing of trees. We're trying tight spacing, and we're using clonal shrubs to try to get a low canopy to form early in the process of reforestation that can help shade out the invasive plants. Through that, we've also planted at the same time fast-growing canopy trees to grow up through that first canopy, and we also have some slow-growing canopy trees in there that we think will eventually take over. So we're just in the first couple of years of that. More to come as those studies develop. We're testing lots of different ways to protect all of those trees as well. We're in the beginning stages of studies on that as well. Speaking of serendipity, sometimes construction happens. Um, and so, we try to take change as an opportunity to learn something. So here's an example of a place where a water pipe needed to be put in. And so it was put in an area where we had some fairly healthy meadow vegetation. So we took the top 3 inches of topsoil from the area that had healthier meadow vegetation, and we stockpiled it, and then we're using it as a seed source, and we're testing that in relationship to the standard practice, which would be to seed with a mix. We're trying seed bank alone, the mix, and seed bank plus mix to see how those do. We'll be sampling that next summer. We're curious about the effects of the work that we do on the ecosystems that we care about, and we're very interested in water quality. So we have upgraded our stream monitoring over the last couple of years. We're now using standardized protocols that the state of Pennsylvania uses, and we have these sort of 9 major stream reaches that we are sampling, and we've chosen a good section of each of them where we're looking at all of the benthic macroinvertebrates, which is the little insects that live in water, or insects that live in water for at least part of their life cycle, that can tell us a lot about the quality of the water in the stream. And we will be able to track that over time, and hopefully as we continue our plantings, then we will also be able to see, as those grow, effects on water quality. We do a lot of collaboration. We are primarily plant nerds, and so we like to collaborate with people who love birds, people who love bugs, people who love all kinds of other creatures. And what you see here is the Pennsylvania Natural Heritage Program working with us on the ecological baseline study. A grad student from the University of Delaware, an entomologist. We work with the Pennsylvania Kestrel Partnership, and then that is a purple martin getting a teeny weeny little backpack that is part of a network of what are called MODIS towers that are all over the eastern, they go from Canada down to northern South America to look at bird migration. And we're also working with a University of Delaware professor who is studying the local movement, and they've actually discovered some things about the social dynamics of purple martin, like who leaves when, but more on that later. Really fun tidbit, just got this week. This is one of a purple martin that was born at Longwood in the Idea Garden, made it to Venezuela. So very cool to be able to watch that in almost real time. So we're working with lots of people. We love to work with our broader community. If any of you, I know some of you are on iNaturalist, because I know some of you ID my plants on iNaturalist. Yeah, community science is a great thing. We get a lot of great insect observations, actually, from iNaturalist. If you see cool bugs, please snap a photo. We also have amazing teams of volunteers that work with us. We have almost 100 volunteers that work with us across the year doing different things. And we have multiple amazing, fairly independent science data collection teams, including our bloom log team, who keep track of what's blooming in the Meadow Garden. They're starting this week across the entire season. We have a year-round bird survey team, and we have our bluebird box volunteers that help support our bluebird populations. We also have our plant scouting team that helps with mapping invasive plants. And I want to talk a little bit about a project we've been working on with them. We wanted to try to figure out a way to map the invasive plants that we do have so that we can target, okay, now is the right time to manage Canada thistle. Where do we need to go? Where are all the places we need to go and do that? So we were curious if there was a way to have volunteers help us with that, but in a way where not every volunteer has to be an expert botanist, right? There aren't a lot of expert botanists in the world. And there are a lot of there are a lot of people with plant knowledge around here, which is wonderful. And our volunteers are generally more knowledgeable than most. But we thought, well, if we could develop a way to do this, that could help other people who have volunteers helping them too, who might not be as knowledgeable as our volunteers. So we started thinking about this in terms of what I'm calling phenobvious traits, where we're using phenology, which is the timing of life cycles. So when does it flower? When does it fruit? What obvious things happen in the life cycle of a plant that might make it easy to ID in a particular moment? So for example, Japanese barberry has these bright red fruits in December. That's a thing where you could just go and look for those, and you could map wherever you see them. So we've been developing, here's a black jet bead looking very green with nothing else around it that's green. So we've been developing a way to map those over time using those obvious traits. And we're developing this actually as a tool for the entire Mid-Atlantic region, and we're using data from iNaturalist, and it's a really fun project. That'll be getting published sometime soon. We also use the invasion curve with this. So, we ask the volunteers to map plants that we want to know where every single one of them is, because we might be able to actually remove them all. Those get mapped really carefully. Things that are really widespread, okay to make a big blob. So we use that as part of our criteria. So we do a lot of ecological assessment. That's the mode we're in, is getting a lot of baseline information right now so that we can understand change over time. And that helps us to understand progress and really, sets the stage for decades to come. And we can then look at how all the different dimensions of biodiversity and ecosystem health are changing so that we can understand what progress we're making, and that fuels our decision making and our understanding of what we should do next. So I want to talk a little bit about managing meadows, because this is the thing that people have the most questions about at Longwood, because everybody goes in the meadow garden. And when people think about the natural areas at Longwood, they really think about the meadow garden first, which, of course, it's gorgeous. It's full of surprises. To understand meadow management, it's important to understand that naturally occurring meadows, are actually often temporary, or they occur in really harsh environments for plants. So they often don't last very long. So they could be in really dry soils or places which often have frequent fire. Very high altitude, cold places. If you've been up in a beautiful alpine meadow up by tree line, basically trees are being prevented by something. So basically you only get short herbaceous vegetation without trees if trees can't live there, is the short version of this. So plant communities change over time. If you have like a fertile old field, for example, it is going to grow trees in this area generally. And so that process is called ecological succession. There's change. Plant communities follow one another over time. And there's changes in the community composition and the structure as plants change the environment in that space. So you could have a flood, and then when the flood recedes, you get a succession. You could have fire, and when the fire is over, then you have succession. You could have agriculture. If that field is abandoned, you get succession. We have old fields for the most part at Longwood, so the hay fields as well as crop fields. If you don't do anything else in an old field, eventually you will get a forest. And so we manage to keep that succession in an early stage by adding ecological disturbance. So we basically set the clock back on that ecological succession process. And we need to do that really frequently. So every 1 to 3 years, we need to burn it or mow it, basically. We have the fortune to be able to use prescribed fire here because we have some relatively uncomplicated places to use it. And basically what this does is it limits woody plants, it increases light and space for seeds and seedlings, it makes good germination environments for those meadow plants. So we also use mowing, prescribed fire. Has anybody gotten to watch a meadow burn here? Yes, yeah, some of you have. We're not burning in the meadow garden this year because we already had our ecological disturbance last summer with that big mowing that happened. Darned escaped prisoner. So after prescribed fire, it looks a little drastic, right? But what is actually going on is that you've taken off the thatch, and there are a bunch of perennial plants immediately under the surface ready to come up. And within a matter of weeks, they start covering the soil, and then by the end of the summer, you're back to a lush meadow again. We accomplish this with the help of our students and staff. We have excellent photographers who take pictures like this. And this is really a neat opportunity for training that our professional horticulture students, many of whom are pictured here, and international students get to participate in as well. It's very popular with them. In last year, we burned 2 units in the Meadow Garden, and we did a lot of mowing in other units. Our management is very seasonal. The plants tell us what to do, just like a farmer. As the seasons change, what we do changes. We do our planning on an annual basis, we do planning on a seasonal basis, and then we work it into what we're gonna do on a daily basis. Maybe some of you love Gantt charts the way that I love Gantt charts, but we have, this is like a small slice of the, it's probably like goes from the ceiling to the floor with lines of different things that we need to do throughout the year that happen on a cyclic basis. So if we return to that question, how can we take today's biodiversity with us into the future? Well, people shape the future. We shape the future by protecting the things that we care about, by innovating new ideas and new approaches to solve problems, by reintroducing things that have been lost from a place, by observing carefully what happens, by learning from the things that we do and the changes that happen that we have no control over. We restore, and we transform, and that makes the difference for all of that biodiversity that lives in the environment around us. We make progress along that restorative continuum. And to do that requires quite a community of people with a variety of different skills and a lot of enthusiasm. So with that, thank you for listening, and I'd be happy to hear any questions. There are microphones going around, so if you raise your hand, a microphone will come to you. I see there are a couple hands here.
Yes, would you elaborate on the variables you're looking at in reforestation?
Okay, so the kinds of variables we're thinking about with reforestation. So we're working with a number of different variables. When you think about establishing a forest is a thing that lives a long time, right? And a forest has both composition in terms of what species are there and structure. And a lot of reforestation efforts focus only on trees. So I'm very interested in the shrub layer. And I think it's one of the things that I'm working with the experiments that we're doing right now is using different growth forms, so different heights, different speeds of growth, different sort of form of the plant, and using those to try to create a good light environment for the health of the forest over the long term, to reduce the invasive species by shading them out sooner, and then to create a multi-layered structure by having trees of different sizes and trees that mature at different heights. That's some of it. We're also working with forest soils and building those using woody organic matter.
The one thing that caught my ear was you were planting things close together.
Oh yeah, spacing. That's the other piece. So close together. There are a lot of things you can do with spacing. When you grow trees closer together, they tend to grow up faster. If they're more spaced out, they'll grow out more. So you can adjust using spacing how quickly you get the trees growing up fast. In a couple of experimental areas we're working with right now, we're using tight spacing so that we can get rapid canopy closure, because we know that these areas have a bunch of invasive plants in them, and we would like to shade them as quickly as possible.
You mentioned how you also take care of the health of the streams and ponds. So besides monitoring, because I'm thinking, well, so much of what's going into them is out of our control. And what do you do besides just monitoring what's going on with them to keep them healthy?
Right, so right now we're doing baseline monitoring work so that we have a baseline from which to compare over time. And one of the main thing that we're doing right now is shading them. So we have, like many landscapes in this region, we have farm fields or old farm fields.
Did you say
with
shading them?
Shading, yeah. So we have old farm fields where there aren't trees on the side of the stream at all. So we're planting those with native species so that we can keep them cool and prevent erosion.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks. So you've been here 5 years almost.
Mm-hmm.
So have you seen, and you've been collecting data, have you seen any trends so far in those 5 years? I know you're looking at a longer time scale, but I was just curious
So,
if something's emerged for you
Yeah,
that's
our
remarkable.
longer term data is really like we are still collecting the baseline. So we don't have that like big picture response yet, but I mean, we are seeing response to smaller, in the smaller studies that we're doing. Like we're in our there was the first year where we set it up, and we have 2 years of treatment on the microstygium Japanese stiltgrass study, and we're seeing some interesting things there that we're going to present at the Mid-Atlantic meeting of the Ecological Society of America so that we can talk about them. And if anybody wants to know particulars, you can talk to me.
So with your work on the invasive species and how you're trying many different methods and timing and various things, will you be publishing anything that is readily accessible to the public? I mean, I have lesser celandine. It's a really tough one to control, and it would be wonderful if you were able to tell me how to take care of it.
We don't have a study going on that one, but there is good information out there. Yes is the answer. I mean, we all of our work is designed so that we can share it. So we'll be, creating, scientific publications and also writing for a broader audience. Yes. Once we have, we're scientists, so we want to be really sure about what we're going to say before we say it.
Hello. I know that a lot of trees have symbiotic relationships with fungi, and I was wondering in your restoration of the forest if you analyze fungal populations or species interactions with the trees.
I would love to know more about how the fungal world is working in these systems. That would be a really good collaboration. We don't have that collaboration set up yet, but definitely we would be open to talking to people about that. I know in the experiment where we added a whole heck of a lot of wood chips to our planting area to build the organic matter, we did see both tree root and fungal colonization of that very quickly. So as the organic matter started to break down, which we were happy to see.
And then, sorry, another question. In terms of your monitoring of the streams and ponds, I was wondering if any runoff of fertilizers or pesticides was affecting the local stream populations, or if you're monitoring for that, and if you see or if you monitor for algal populations as well.
So we're doing primarily benthic macroinvertebrate surveys right now, which kind of capture a variety of different conditions. That's one of the reasons that they're used internationally as a response, because there are different creatures are sensitive to different things, and they can tell you about what, if the ones that are sensitive to higher nutrient aren't there, that could tell you that you should look in the landscape to see if there is a problem with that. And so we're in the stage now of collecting that information so we can see where we might have challenges that need to be addressed.
Thank you. A couple of questions. So question one regarding the removal of plants. You showed some slides with pictures of garbage bags. What happens in terms of the destruction of that material so that it doesn't propagate elsewhere?
That's a good question. Invasive plants really vary in the degree to which they might cause a problem if you left them right where they are. So there are some species that you can pull them and just kind of pile them high and dry, and they'll dry out and it's not an issue. Other ones, and I think what you probably saw was garlic mustard that was going to seed. So if you've got seeds, then you need to take a little bit more care. There are also some species that can grow from small fragments. Those are fun. We do a combination of things. Sometimes we will put them in the waste stream, but usually what happens is they get composted hot. We have our soils and composting program produces compost, and it gets real hot in there. And there have been a number of studies that show that hot composting takes care of most of the problems. So we do a combination of different things depending on the species and what the material is, and whether, how likely it is to cause that it would spread, that the material could spread.
If I looked at the meadow the day before you burn it, and then I looked at it 6 months later, what are the key differences I would see? Or would it look the same?
That's a good question. I like that question. One of the things that I love seeing in the meadow after we burn it is that what comes up that year is different. Fire, and the reason that we like to use fire is that fire is not as uniform as mowing. And it also removes the thatch, so that creates a better germination environment. But fire burns hot in some places and cooler in others. And that might just depend on where there was a puddle, So at a micro scale, you get a lot more variation with fire. And so you get so that affects the plant material that's in that area. So that could be perennial plants that have been suppressed, that are there, that are ready to pop up. That could be germination of seeds that are waiting in the seed bank. And so what I love is after the burn, seeing species I haven't seen in a while, come up in a big, we had last burn, we had a whole bunch of penstemon come up. There was a huge sweep of it that wasn't there the year before. So I think just that changing dynamic is one of the things that's really neat about the prescribed fire.
So this year, we had a burn and a mow on the same part of the meadow. What are you looking for in spring?
I'm totally curious. I can't wait to see. I mean, we got, meadow plants are resilient. They are disturbance adapted, so, they'll be okay. But I'm curious to see what comes up.
It sounds like an incredible amount of work that's super rewarding.
I have a great team.
And I'm thinking about how environments are constantly evolving, and thinking about climate change and what you're doing now and what you're looking for might be informed or guided by also thinking about what you're hearing in the industry for the future that you need to be looking out for as the climate starts changing in ways that haven't been known before. So as you're doing the work now and cataloging all that you have and all that, and understanding that there may be changes in the future, just how does that affect the way in which you're looking at some of the programs?
That's a good question. Part of the point of the long-term research is helping us to understand the interactions between what we're doing and broader scale change. We are thinking a lot about planting for the future, and we are doing a little bit. We've started doing a little bit of experimentation with using plant material from further south in the range. So for species where we have a large, like a species where we're near the north end of its range, we might try buying some plant material from further south to see how it does, and then we'll track that. And there are a few species that we know that they're used in horticulture that are from further south, where we're just outside their native range right now, where we've tried planting a couple of those, or a few of those species in some of our experimental reforestations. So we're thinking about it. Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. We are seeing, more extreme storms as one example of things that are changing already. Yeah.
Has Longwood come up with any good plan for controlling deer?
Has Longwood come up with a good plan for controlling deer? Well, we're doing things that other people are doing. We do manage our deer. We have a staff-only small hunting program where all of the harvest gets eaten, and often as sausage. So, we use, we use a variety of protection methods.
Okay.
Nothing drastically different. We have some exclosure areas around some of our larger plantings. Like if you look at the edge of Route 52, there's a big deer fence along one side. Yep.
You're not advocating the introduction of mountain lions or anything?
I'm not sure they would want to live here, but
Okay, all right. I have one other question, and that is about Canada goldenrod, and if fire has any effect on that, its bullying techniques.
Well, Canada goldenrod is definitely vigorous in our meadow garden, and we burn the meadow garden, so it's fine with that. Sometimes if we would like to have, it is a very vigorous native plant. It's in Europe, it is an invasive species. It is a very vigorous plant. So sometimes if we want less of it in an area, we'll mow it earlier in the season. That tends to set it back. Like after it is already greened up, that'll set it back for a while.
I'm familiar with the deer fence on the east side of 52, and how many years would that have been now since they moved 52?
About 10.
About 10 years. And we're from Kendall, so we walk along that fence line a lot. And have you drawn any conclusions yet about what's doing well or better because no deer or not?
Well, the trees have survived, which is a good indicator that the deer didn't eat them. So that's helpful. There are a few species, herbaceous species that were planted in there that are also doing well. I don't know if any of you have ever tried to maintain a deer fence. It's an interesting thing to do because if you put a deer fence in a forest, will a tree fall on it? Yes. The question is when and how long it's going to take you to go fix it. So, it's an interesting technique in that it's not perfect. It's not impermeable to deer and requires maintenance. So, I would say in the broad sense, it has worked as a way to grow trees, and that there are some herbaceous species in there that were planted that are also doing well.
We're in the process of putting in a deer fence around 40 acres in our big woods. It's between us and you. And we're anxious to see whether the elimination of deer enhances the ability for the forest to regenerate better.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. We do have some recruitment also, like related to your comment. We are seeing some recruitment of young trees as well that weren't planted. So, that is one of the other advantages of that kind of approach. All right. Is that all the questions? Well, I'm happy to stay and answer some more questions if people have additional questions. Thank you.